Hello and welcome. In this screencast, we'll take a look at how to make use of the powerful cell referencing features of Excel with a simple example. In this example, we have three employees, Abby, Bob, and Kathy, and they're working on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for this many hours. So for example, Bob has worked 5 hours on Tuesday and so on. And we'd like to compute how much to pay each of these employees. Now imagine that the hourly rate is $10. Say a fixed amount of $10. Okay, so I'm not even going to write it down here. Now, so if you wanted to compute how much Abby should be paid on Monday, you would first enter the equal sign and then you point to the cell C5 and that gets entered here, and then you multiply that times 10 and that's $30. Now next, if you want to find out how much Abby should be paid on Tuesday, you would then type equals and click on the cell D5 times 10. You can do that, or you can just copy this formula that you entered here by dragging on the bottom right corner square dot that you see over here. It's called the fill handle. Just copy that to the right and that just copies your formula. So here it is C5 times 10 and here it is D5 times 10. So as you copy your formula one step to the right, the C5 in your formula becomes D5 in the new location. And likewise, if you just copy it one step further to the right, the D5 becomes E5. And the reason you have C becoming D and then becoming E is because you're copying this from left to right. And as you copy it from left to right, the number remains unchanged, which is 5, but the letter does change. Okay, so if as you copy from I to J to K, what was C becomes D, what was D becomes E. And this is an example of the famous relative cell referencing that Excel provides. Now this works horizontally and vertically. So let's say if you want to copy this formula to the bottom, let's say you want to compute how much Bob made on Monday, then you can just drag this formula one step down, and this time C5 becomes C6. So the C remains the same, but the number changes from 5 to 6 and then from 6 to 7. You don't have to just copy one particular cell. You can also copy two cells in the same manner. So you could just select both these, J5 and K5, and copy them to the rows 6 and 7. And you will then have the appropriate numbers for salaries to be paid for all the employees. However, life is a little bit more complicated. Now, instead of having just a $10 flat hourly rate for everybody, what if each person has their own hourly rate? $11 for Abby, $9 for Bob, and $13 for Kathy. So supposing that's the hourly rate. Now these calculations will need to be deleted. And now we'll have to compute everything afresh. So Abby earned $3 times 11, 3 hours times $11, $33 on Monday. Now I'm going to try and copy this. How much did Abby earn on Tuesday? I'll just copy this to the right. Oh, but you get a wrong value. What's happening here? So if you look at the formula, C5 times G5, C5 times G5 was what Abby was paid on Monday. But for Tuesday, C5 becomes D5, which is fine, and G5 becomes H5. So you can see here G5 became H5, right? And H5 does not make sense because H5 contains the name Abby, and you cannot multiply that with a number. So how do you make sure that as you copy this formula to the right, how do you make sure that the 11 stays as 11? The way you do that is by means of absolute cell referencing. So what you do is, before you copy the cell to the right, you have to go to the formula and locate G5 here, G5. If you want G5 to not change, you put a $sign before the G. Okay, the $sign before the G ensures that as you copy this formula to cells on the right or on the left, the G remains the same. And I press enter. And now if I were to copy then you have C5 times G5, and here it is D5 times G5 again, because you have the dollar sign before the G. And now everything is okay. So if you want to copy this one step to the right again, you have E5 times dollar G5, and it works perfectly. What if you want to copy this formula to Bob? How much did Bob make on Monday? If you want to copy this cell to the bottom, it works fine. C5 becomes C6 and G5 becomes G6. Okay, G5 and G6. That's appropriate, so you don't have to do anything else. You can just copy this further down. And as before, you can just select both these cells, copy them 2 cells down. So everything is perfect now. Now, what if there is an additional wrinkle? Let us say maybe there's a government rule or something. There's a bonus that's payable for anybody that shows up on Monday. They are paid, say, $12, $13 if they show up on Tuesday, and $8 if they show up on Wednesday. So in addition to this payment, let's say they're paid this amount. So how would you incorporate that? You would then need to add plus I3. Okay, so that would be the new thing that you'd have to add. So now Abby receives the payment for the amount of number of hours worked plus I3, which is the bonus due for anybody that shows up to work on a Monday. Now if you tried to copy this one step down, you would again get wrong values, and the reason for that is again easy to see but slightly different. So I3 here has now become I4 as you copy it down. I3 becomes I4 as you copy this formula down to this cell. Again, it's this relative cell referencing at work, but this time it's at work for the number rather than for the letter. How do you prevent that from happening? You prevent that by entering a dollar sign before the 3 before you copy. So as you copy this formula down or up, the dollar sign ensures that the number 3 remains the number 3. And now I just copy this down and I get a suitable answer. And I can also copy this formula all the way to the right and expect that it will work perfectly because of this dollar sign before the 3. So notice that if you want to copy some formula from left to right, but you want a particular cell letter to remain the same, then you put a dollar sign before the letter. In this case, before G. If you want to copy a formula all the way down, and if you wish a particular cell to remain the same with respect to its number, in this case I3, then you put a dollar sign before the 3. So both these are examples of partially absolute cell referencing, if you will. So now finally we'll take a look at a perfectly absolute cell referencing. So let's say you have let's say payroll tax that needs to be deducted, and the payroll tax percent is 15%. Say now, how much do you pay Abby? You would pay this entire amount times 1 minus this tax rate, 1 minus I1. Okay, so that's how much you would pay Abby. Now, so you would pay 85% of the amount due for Abby. And now if you were to copy this all the way to the left, to the bottom, you want to make sure that I1 doesn't become I2, doesn't become I3, and so on. It should remain I1. So you put a dollar sign before the 1. Okay, and then you copy this down. But if you want to copy this to the right, then you want to make sure I doesn't become J and J doesn't become K. So you put a dollar sign before the letter I. So now if you were to copy this all the way to the bottom and then to the right, then you get correct answers. And the reason for that is because the cell I1 remains as I1 no matter where you copy this, vertically or horizontally. And this is an example of absolute cell referencing. So Hopefully this has clarified some of the concepts pertaining to cell referencing. Very briefly, as you're copying cells from left to right, if you want the letter to remain the same, as in this case, you put a $sign before the letter. If you're copying cell values from top to bottom, formulas from top to bottom, and you want some particular formula, some particular cell to have the same number, then you put the $sign before the number. And in some cases, you want a particular cell to be fixed, whether you're copying it left to right or top to bottom, in which case you put a $sign before the letter as well as before the number. Okay, so that's how you take care of this little problem. And if you do this right, then that means it can save you countless hours trying to copy cell formulas. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.